Zebulun, Elon, I, the Tetragrammaton, the Lord God Most High, I do exercise thee, and do powerfully command thee, O Spirit. Elon, I, the Tetragrammaton, the Lord God Most High, I do exercise thee, and do powerfully command.
In the dark shadows, in the white cold, fearlessly we search for knowledge new and old. We drink the strong spirits and read the ancient tomes. The order of the Abracast. We are the brave and the bold. Occult, history, conspiracy, and violence.
Welcome to the Abracast. I'm your host, John Towers. We're recording deep below, I don't know, where do we record deep below tonight? I don't know. The Stigmata Studio's building in the steel buckle of the Rust Belt. That's a good old one. Okay, so we're continuing with our series on Exodus here this evening. And the last episode on Exodus we're talking about the water. All the escaped Hebrews were bitching about being thirsty in the desert. I'm sure that brings us up to speed. So, here we go. Smite a scorner, and the simple will beware. The destruction of Amalek brought Jethro to his senses. Jethro was originally in the same plot with Amalek, both having incited Pharaoh against Israel. Sorry, I gotta get a bookmark. I'm a little rusty. But when he saw that Amalek lost his world and the others, he repented of his sinful ways, saying, "There's nothing left to me but to go over to the God of Israel." And although he dwelt in the greatest wealth and honor, he determined to set out for the desert to Moses, his God. Arrived at the camp of Israel, he could not enter it, for it was enveloped in a cloud that none could pierce. Hence he wrote a letter to Moses, and he shot it off with an arrow so that it fell into the camp, and the letter read, "I adjure thee by thy two sons and by thy God to come meet me and receive me kindly, for thou wilt not do it for my sake, do it for thy wife's sake. And if thou wilt not do it for her sake, do it for her son's sake." Jethro brought with him his daughter Zipporah, from whom Moses had been divorced, as well as the two sons, her only children after her separation from Moses. She had wed no other man. At first, Moses was inclined to give no ear to the letter, but God said to him, "I, through whose word the world came into being, I bring men to me, and do not thrust them back. I have permitted Jethro to approach me, and I did not push him from me. So do thou too receive this man who desires to betake himself under the wings of the Shekinah. Let him approach and do not repulse him." God herewith taught Moses that no one should repulse with the left hand and beckon with the right. Moses and Aaron, Nadab, and Abihu, together with the 70 elders of Israel carrying with them the sacred ark, hastened to welcome Jethro kindly, and Moses so honored his father-in-law to make an obseisance before him and kiss him before Moses told his father-in-law of the great miracles God had wrought for Egypt, such as the exodus from Egypt, the cleaving of the sea, the rain of manna, and the rest. He offered him the greeting of peace, for great is peace that precedes events that praise of God. After the peace greeting, Moses, to draw his father-in-law nearer to true faith in God, and his revelation began to relate to him the miracles that God had wrought for them at the exodus of Egypt, during the passing through the Red Sea, and during the war with Amalek. Moreover, the manna that God gives us, we perceive the taste of bread, of meat, of fish, and short of all the dishes there are. This manna tastes like sloppy joes, and this manna tastes like kishkavarnikas. Out of the well that God gives us, we draw a drink that possesses the taste of old wine, as well as new, of milk and honey, in short of all the beverages that exist. This water tastes like a jihad. The land of milk and honey. We shall, Moses continued, receive 6 other gifts from God. The land of Israel, the future world, the new world, the sovereignty of David, the institution of priests and of Levites. When Jethro heard all this, he determined to become a Jew and to believe in the only God. And although he felt a pang in his heart upon hearing that the Egyptians had perished, for no one should scoff at a heathen before a proselyte who is not a Jew. Of the 10 generations standing, he burst into the song of praise to God for the deeds he had no one for his people in truth. It reflects the shame upon Moses and the 60 myriad of Jews that they had not given thanks to God for the release from Egypt. Until Jethro came and did so, he said, "Praise be God who delivered Moses and Aaron, as well as the whole nation of Israel, from the bondage of Pharaoh." That great dragon, and of the Egyptians. Truly great is the Lord before all gods. For whereas formerly not a single slave succeeded in escaping Egypt, he led 60 myriads out of Egypt. There is no God whom I had not at some time in my life worshipped, but now I must admit that none is like the God of Israel. This God had not been unknown to me heretofore. But now I know him better, for his fame will sound throughout the world, because he visited upon the Egyptians exactly what they had planned to undertake against Israel. They wanted to destroy Israel by water, and by water they were destroyed, with sacrifices and a feast, and the arrival of Jethro celebrated, for after he had made the burnt offering not far from the bush of thorns that had been unscathed by fire, Jethro prepared a feast of rejoicing for the whole people, at which Moses did not consider it below the dignity to wait on the guests in person. In this he followed the example of Abraham, who in the persons of the 3 angels, though they appeared in the guise of idolatrous Arabs. So this is the angels when they were on their way to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. They stopped at Abraham's house and he fed them and rubbed their feet and wound up bargaining to save some of the folks there. Abraham, like Moses, sought to follow in the ways of the Lord, to provide each according to his wants, and to grant everyone what he lacks, whether it be a righteous man or an idolater who through his sins conjure up God's wrath. To this feast of people sat down according to their tribes. They ate and drank and were merry, while Aaron and Jethro with their relatives sang songs of thanksgiving to God and praised him as the creator and donor of their lives and their liberty. This motherfucker. And at the same time, they gave due appreciation to Moses, through whose courage everything had happily come to pass. In his words of gratitude towards Moses, Jethro also gave expression to many glorious eulogies on the people of Israel, but especially extolled Moses, who through difficulties and dangers had shown so much courage in the salvation of his friends. Now I will tell you the story of the installation of elders. Gather around the burning bush, children. Jethro, who had come to Moses shortly before the revelation on Mount Sinai, stayed with his son-in-law for more than a year. The first month, however, he had no opportunity of observing Moses in the capacity of judge, for Moses spent the time from the day of the revelation to the 10th day of Tishri almost entirely in heaven. Hence, Jethro could not be present at a court proceeding of his before the 11th day of Tishri. The first day of Moses' return from heaven, Jethro now perceived how Moses sat like a king upon his throne, while the people who brought their lawsuits before him stood around him. This so displeased him that he said to his son-in-law, "Why sittest thou thyself alone, and all the people stand by thee from the morning until even?" And Moses answered, "Because the people come to me to inquire of God, and it is not in my honor that they stand, but the honor of God, whose judgments they would know. When they are in doubt over a case of clean or unclean, or when they are in a dispute between two parties, which they desire to have settled exactly according to the law, or in conformity with a compromise, they come to me. And when the parties dispute leave me, they part as friends and no longer enemies. I expound to the people besides the word of God and his decisions." On the day that Moses again took up the activity as judge, and Jethro had for the first time the chance of observing him, came the mixed multitude with the pleas that they, like the other Israelites, they wanted to share in the Egyptian booty. Ding, 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 ding. Moses' method, first seen by him in practice, struck Jethro as almost absurd, and he therefore said, "The thing that thou dost is not good." Through delicacy, softening his real opinion, "It is bad," to "it is not good. The people," he continued, "will surely unbraid thee and Aaron and the 2 sons of Nadab and Abihu and the 70 elders if thou continuest in this fashion. But if thou hearkenest to my voice, thou wilt fare well, provided God approves my plan. This is, that thou shalt be the vessel of the revelations of God, and shalt lay the revelations of God before the people as often as thou receivest them, so that they may understand the exposition of the Torah, as well as the decisions, and thou shalt instruct them on how to pray. This is the way I pray in the synagogues, how to tend to the sick and how to bury their dead, how to render the services of friendship to one another, how to practice justice, and how, in some cases, not to insist on strict justice. But as for the trying the people as judge, thou shouldest, in according with the prophetic insight, choose men that are possessed of wisdom, fear of God, and modesty, and hate covetousness, love of truth, love of humanity, and a good name. And these shall devote all their times to these trials and to the study of the Torah. If God approve my plan, then wilt thou and Aaron and his sons and the 70 elders and all of the people dwell in peace. The counsel of Jethro's found great favor in Moses' eyes, for he had only too well aware of the difficulties and the annoyances with which he had to contend. So this motherfucker is trying to get all these people through the desert, and Jethro comes up with this idea, hey, instead of wasting your time settling all these court cases, why don't you appoint someone else to do that shit so you can just chill out and do the Torah and climb mountains and look at God's butt? Spoiler alert. The people were very dispatchous, being willing to spend 70 silverlings in litigation costs for the sake of gaining 1 silverling. And did their utmost to lengthen their disputes at law. And when they say that Moses was about to cast a decision against them, he demanded that the lawsuit be adjourned, declaring that had witnesses, that had other proof, which he would bring forward on the next occasion. But they were not merely litigious. They were also spiteful, and vented their temper on Moses. If Moses went out early, they would say, behold the son of Amram, who bestakes himself early to the gatherings of manna, that he may get the largest grains. And if he went out late, they would say, behold the son of Amram, who goes through the multitude to gather in marks of a hone. But if he chooses a path aside from the crowd, they say, behold, the son of Amram, who makes it impossible for us to follow the simple commandment to hone a sage. Then Moses said, if did this, you were not content. And if I did that, you were not content. I can no longer bear you alone. The Eternal, your God, has multiplied you. And behold, ye are on this day the stars of heavens for multitude. The Lord God of your fathers make you 1,000 times so many as ye, and bless you as he hath promised you. The Israelites were not content with the blessing of Moses, and said to him, O our teacher Moses, we do not desire thee to bless us. You could, we've had much greater blessings given to us. God spoke to our father Abraham, I will bless thee, and in multiplying, I will multiply thee seed as the stars of the heavens, and of the sand which upon the seashore. And thou dost limit our blessings. And Moses cried, I am the only creature of flesh and blood, limited in my power. Hence is my blessing limited. I give you blessings, but the blessings of God remain preserved for thee. For ye, I should say. And he will bless ye unlimitedly, and multiply you as the fish of the sea and the sands of the seashore, and the stars in the sky and the plants on earth. After he bestowed this blessing upon them, he asked them to propose capable, pious men, and he might appoint them as judges and leaders over them. And he said, if a man were to present himself to me as a candidate for the position of honor, I alone should not be able to decide to what tribe he belonged, and hence when he came. But you know them, and hence it is advisable for you to propose them, and do not think, however, that I feel I must abide by your choice, for it depends solely upon me whether or not I shall appoint them. And the people were very eager to carry on this plan of Moses into execution. They requested him to settle the matter as quickly as possible, but their motive was self-evident or self-interested. For everyone among them said, Moses will now appoint about 80,000 officials. But if I should not be among them, surely my son will be. And if not he, my grandson, and with a gift of some kind, I will be in an easy matter to induce such a judge to look after my interests in court. And Moses, of course, was not deceived about these true sentiments. Still, He paid no further attention to them. He picked out the best men among the people, although they were not possessed of nearly all the good qualities Jethro had thought essential for the judges and leaders of people. With kindly words, he invited them to assume their offices, and he said, "Blessed are ye that are judged worthy of being a leader of the children of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, of a people whom God called his friends, his brothers, his flock, and other titles of love. He impressed upon them that they must possess much patience and must not become impatient. If a lawsuit is brought to them more than once heretofore, he said, you belong to yourself, but from now on you belong to the people. For you judge between every man and his brother and his neighbor, and if you were to appoint judges, do so without respect of persons. Do not say, I will appoint that man because he is a handsome man, or a strong man because he's my kinsman, or because he is a linguist. Such judges will declare the innocent guilty and the guilty innocent, not through wickedness, but through ignorance, and God will reckon the appointment of such judges against you as a perversion of justice on the account of your respective persons. If a wealthy man and a poor man come before your court, do not say, why should I insult the rich man for the small a matter? I will rather give judgment in his favor, but then outside the court tell him to give the poor man what he demands, as he is in the right. But do not, on the other hand, if the poor man is wrong, say the rich man is obligated to assist the poor anyhow, and will now decide in the favor of the poor. That is a decent way he may, without begging, to obtain money from his rich fellow man. Do not, moreover, say, I fear to pronounce judgment, lest that man kill my son, burn my barn, or destroy my plants, for the judgment is God's. After these admonishments, Moses instructed the new judges in the legal procedure in both civil and criminal cases, and at the same time urged the people not to deny the judges the veneration due him, for great is the importance of a justice. For him who hates it, there is no remedy, but for the judge who decides conscientiously is the true peacemaker. For the weal of Israel, of the commonwealth, and indeed of all living creatures. Now let me tell you the story of Jethro rewarded. Although the installation of elders of Moses came to pass in accordance with the command of God, still it was Jethro upon whose advice Moses besought God to lighten his burden, and to permit him partly to transfer the leadership of the people to others. Hence, he did not conceal the name of the advisor, but announced it to all of the people and immortalized him as such in holy scriptures. For he deemed praiseworthy appreciate duly the merits of others. It had, however, been part of God's scheme to reward Jethro for the love he bore with the Torah. And for this reason, he did not allow it to come to pass that Moses had to have his attention called to the plan of installing the elders through his father-in-law, that the Holy Scriptures might devote a whole chapter to the plan of Jethro. This is a life lesson, by the way. Here, this is a business lesson. This is a teamwork lesson. If you want to become indispensable to your boss, take work off of him. Say, hey boss, I got a couple free minutes. Is there anything you need help with? That's the way to do it. I'm not saying your boss is lazy. I'm saying he's got other shit he's got to do. Or she. This, however, was not the only reward for Jethro's piety, who for his love of the Torah excelled all proselytes. A miracle occurred on the very first day of his arrival in camp, for manna in his honor descended at the noon hour, the hour of his arrival, and moreover, in as great quantities as was wont to rain down for 60 myriads of Israelites. He did not have to exert himself to gather the food, for it came over his body. What? Skeet, skeet, skeet. So all he had to do was carry his hand to the mouth to partake of it. Jethro, nevertheless, did not remain with Moses, but returned to his native land. And Moses, of course, tried to persuade his father-in-law to stay. And he said to him, "Do not think that we shall continue to move thus slowly through the desert. Nay, we shall now move directly to the promised land." Only to urge Jethro to stay longer with him did Moses use the words, "we move," so that his father-in-law might believe that Moses too would enter the promised land. For otherwise he would hardly have allowed himself to be persuaded to join the march to Palestine. Moses continued, "I do not want to mislead thee, hence I will tell thee that the land will be divided only among the 12 tribes. And that thou hast no claim to possessions of land, but God bade us to be kind to the proselytes. And to thee we shall be kinder than the other proselytes." Jethro, however, was not to be persuaded by his son-in-law, considered himself in duty bound to return to his native land, for the inhabitants of his city had for many years made a habit of having him store their valuable, as none possessed their confidence in such measures as he. So he's like a bank. He had the keys to the vault where everybody's shit was. If he stayed still longer with Moses, people would have declared that he had absconded with all of these things and fled to Moses to share it with him. And they would have been a blot on his fair name of that of Moses, Jethro, and furthermore made many debts during the year in which he came to Moses. For owing to the hail God had sent upon Egypt before the exodus of Israel, the great famine had arisen in Jethro's home too. And he found himself obliged to lend money for the support of the poor. If he were not now to return to his home, people would say that he had run away in order to evade his creditors. And such talk concerning a man of piety would have been a desecration upon the divine name. So he said to Moses, "There are people who have a fatherland, but no property there. There are also property holders with no family. But I have a fatherland and I have property as well as a family, and hence I desire to return to my fatherland, my property, and my family." But Moses would not yield so soon. And he said to his father-in-law, "If thou dost not accompany us as a favor, I will command thee to do it, so the Israelites might not say, thou hadst been converted to our religion only in an expectation of receiving a share of the promised land. But hadst returned to thy home, then thou didst discover that the proselytes have no claim on property in this holy land. Therefore thy refusal to move with us, thou wilt give the heathens an opportunity to say that Jews do not accept proselytes, since they did not accept even their own king's father-in-law, but allowed him to return to his own land. Thy refusal will injure the glory of God, for the heathen will keep away from the true faith. If thou wilt wander with us, I assure thee that thy seed shall share with us the temple, the Torah, and the future reward of the pious. How canst thou, moreover, who hast seen all the miracles of God wrought for us during the march through the desert, who went as a witness in the way in which the Egyptians became fond of us, and how canst thou now depart from us? It is a sufficient motive for thee to remain with us in order to officiate as a member of the Sanhedrin and teach the Torah. We, on our part, want to retain thee only that thou mightest in difficult cases enlighten our eyes, for thou wert the man who gave us good and fair counsel, to which God himself would not refuse his assent." And Jethro replied, "A candle may glow in the dark, but not when the sun and the moon of what avail would my candle light be? I had therefore better return to my home city, that I make proselytes of its inhabitants, instruct to them in the Torah, and lead them under the wings of the Shekinah. Amid great marks of honor and provided with rich gifts, Jethro returned to his home. Here he converted his kinsmen and his compatriots to the belief in the true God as he is intended. And remember the last episode, or maybe it's 2 episodes ago, Jethro was in trouble because he was an idol maker. He made and worshipped all kinds of pagan idols. So he goes away to the desert. He talks to Moses. He gets some free manna off his body. Skeet, 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 skeet. He comes back a Jew. The descendants of Jethro later settled in Palestine, where the fruitful land of Jericho was allotted to them as a dwelling place. And after the capture of Palestine, the tribes, by mutual consent, agreed that the fertile strip of land at Jericho should fall to the share of the tribe on whose land the temple was to be erected. But when its erection was postponed for a long time, they agreed to allot this piece of land to Jethro's sons, because they, being proselytes, had no other possessions in the Holy Land. 480 years did the descendants of Jethro dwell in Jericho, when, upon the erection of the temple at Jerusalem, they relinquished it to the tribe of Judah, who claimed it as indemnity for the site of the temple. Jethro's descendants inherited his devotion to the Torah, like him, dedicating their lives entirely to its study. As long as Joshua lived, they sat at the master's feet, and when he died, they said, "We left our fatherland and came here for the sake of studying this Torah. If when we now spend our time cultivating the soil, when should we study the Torah?" And therefore gave up their dwelling place in Jericho and moved to the cold, barren wilderness, to Jabez, who there had in his house of instruction. But when they beheld the priests, the Levites, and the noblest of the Jews, they said, "How can we proselytes assume to sit beside these?" Instead of sitting with the house of instruction, they remained in the entrance of it, where they listened to lectures in the manner made further progress in the study of the Torah. They were rewarded for their piety. Their prayer was heard by God, and their good deeds served as protection to Israel. In the account of their pious actions, they were called the families of the scribes, the Trithlathites, and the Shemelathites, and the Suchathites, names designating the piety and the devotion of the Torah. One of these descendants of Jethro was Jonadab, son of Rechab, who, when heard from a prophet that God would destroy the temple, bade all his children, as a token of mourning, to drink no wine, use no oil for anointing themselves, drink no gin, and eat no sloppy joes, nor cut their hair, nor dwell in houses. The Rechabites obeyed this command of their sire and was rewarded for this. God made a covenant with them that their descendants should be members of the Sanhedrin and teach of Israel. The covenant of the Rechabites was even stronger than that with David, for to the house of the latter God promised to keep the covenant only if his descendants were pious, but he made an unconditional covenant with the Rechabites. God rewarded them for their devotion to him. And in this way, although they did not belong to the Jewish nation, from this one can gather how great it would have been if their reward had been Israelites. Hold on, I'm sorry. Moses, I apologize. I'm having technical problems with my book. Moses sent his father-in-law Jethro back to his home. Shortly before the revelation on Mount Sinai, he thought, when God gave us the single commandment of the Torah in Egypt, the Passover, he said, there shall no stranger eat thereof. Surely Jethro may not look upon when God bestowed on us the whole Torah. Moses was right. God did not want Jethro to be present at the revelation. And he said Israel was in Egypt bound to work with clay and bricks. At the same time, Jethro was sitting in his home in peace and quiet. He who suffers with the community shall share in their future joys, but he who does not share in the sufferings of the community shall not take part in their rejoicing. God had not only good cause to delay the giving of the Torah until after the departure of Jethro, but the time he chose to bestowing it was also chosen for good reason. Just as a female proselyte or a woman freed from captivity or an emancipated slave may not enter wedlock before she has been 3 months lived as a free Jewess. So also God waited 3 months for the deliverance of the Israel from bondage and the slavery of Egypt before his union with Israel on Mount Sinai. God furthermore treated his bride as did the king who went off to the marriage ceremony only after he had overwhelmed his chosen bride with many gifts. So did Israel first receive manna, the well, the quails. Not until then was the Torah granted to them. Moses, who had received his promise when God had first appeared to him, when thou hast brought forth the people out of Egypt, ye shall serve God upon the mountain, waiting most longingly for the promised time, saying, when will this time come to pass, and what time draws near? God said to Moses, the time is at hand when I shall bring about something entirely new. The time is at hand when I shall bring about something entirely new. This new miracle which God spoke of was the healing of all the sick among the Jews. God had wanted to give the Torah to the Jews immediately after the exodus from Egypt, but among them were found many that were lame, halt, or deaf. Wherefore God said, the Torah is without blemish, hence would I not bestow it on a nation that has in it such as are burdened with defects, nor do I want to wait until the children shall have grown into manhood, for I do not desire any longer to delay the delight of the Torah. And for these reasons nothing was left him to do but to heal those afflicted with disease. Time between the exodus from Egypt and the revelation on Mount Sinai, all the blind among the Israelites were regained their sight. All the halt became whole, and all the Torah might be given to a sound and healthy people. God wrought for the generations the same miracle, in which will hereafter bring about the future world, when the eyes of the blind shall be opened, the ears of the deaf shall be unstopped, the lame man leaps the lame man leaps as an hart, and the tongues of the dumb sing. Not only physically with this generation free from blemishes, but spiritually too. It stood on high plane. Never the combined merits of such people that made them worthy of their high calling. Never before or after lived a generation of worthy as the receiving of the Torah. Had there been but one missing, God who would not have given them the Torah, for he layeth wisdom for the righteous. He is a buckler for them that walk uprightly. For one other reason, God delayed the revelation of the Torah. He had intended giving them the Torah immediately after their exodus from Egypt, but at the beginning of the march through the desert, great discord reigned among them, nor was the harmony established until the new moon of the 3rd month, when they arrived at Mount Sinai, whereupon God said, "The ways of the Torah are the ways of loveliness, and all its paths are paths of peace. I will yield the Torah to a nation that dwells in peace." This decision of God now to give them the Torah also shows how mighty is the influence of penance. For they had been sinful upon their arrival at Mount Sinai, continuing to tempt God for doubting his omnipotence. After a short time, however, they changed in spirit and hardly had reformed when God found them worthy of revealing to them the Torah. The 3rd month was chosen for the revelation because everything that is closely connected with the Torah and with Israel is triple in number. The Torah consists of 3 parts: the Pentateuch, the prophets, and the Hagiographa. Similarly, the oral law consists of the Midrash, the Halakha, and the Haggadah. The communications between God and Israel were carried on by 3, Moses, Aaron, and Miriam. Israel is also divided into 3 divisions: priests, Levites, and laymen. And they are furthermore the descendants of the 3 patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. For God had preference for the 3rd. And it was the 3rd of Adam's son Seth who became the ancestor of humanity. And so too it was the 3rd among Noah's sons, Shem, who attained a high station. Among the Jewish kings too, it was the 3rd, Solomon, who God distinguished before all others. And the number 3 plays particularly important part in the life of Moses. He belonged to the tribe of Levi, which is not only the 3rd of the tribes, but has a name consisting of 3 letters. He himself is the third of the children of the family. His own name consists of 3 letters. In his infancy, he had been concealed by his mother throughout 3 months, the 3rd month of the year, the preparation of 3 days. Did he receive the Torah on the mountain, the name of which consists of 3 letters. So thank you guys for tuning in while I get my shit straightened back out here. I appreciate you clicking in and joining me this evening. And I'll see you soon. See you in a few days for sure.
Thank you for listening, and we hope that you enjoyed the show. Please send an email or find us on social media and let us know what you think about the show. We would appreciate it if you would give us a 5-star rate and review wherever you find your favorite podcasts. You can find Stigmata Studios, graphic, novels, and comic books. Take control of your destiny. Understand your past. Put your present in context and know your future with a twist. Check out the Abracast Tarot card deck. Your body is your temple. So let's make sure you got a badass t-shirt on it. Variety of cool occult themed t-shirts. And other merch like stickers, wall art, mugs, and more. Welcome to the Red Archive. Get access to over 50 hours of archived episodes, more bonus audio, additional exclusive content. All this for only $1 a month. Are you interested in the occult, history, conspiracy, and violence? Learn more at Abracast.com.